faced seemingly insurmountable odds and overcame them to achieve change. The result of their work is the book entitled Surmountable: How Citizens from Selma to Seoul Changed the World. Co-author Bruce Gruber spoke with producer Megan Cameron.
How did you choose which movements you would explore in the book?
We started with this original idea, like, is there a playbook for determining what's successful? So we looked across media eras, the newspaper era, radio, TV, social media. Over the course of the last 100 years, we looked at a geographic spread, and then we looked at a spread of a broad range of different subjects so that it can be fairly universal. And from that, we came up with 13, including 3 overseas: the Arab Spring starting in Tunisia, the Candlelight Revolution overthrowing President Park in South Korea, and the Euromaidan Revolution in Ukraine. We felt that these 13 movements would provide a breadth and depth that can provide a lot of answers.
Very interesting.
And you focus on some that many of us would know: the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War protest. You also write about Alice Paul and the battle for suffrage in the U.S. She learned a great deal under the British suffragists, the Pankhursts, who were willing to be a bit more radical than their American counterparts. How did Alice Paul help bring the battle more into the streets in the U.S.?
She was a Quaker. Back in the day, you had a social responsibility, if you were a Quaker, to find what was your calling, or what they call your concern. And she actually had an epiphany while speaking, I think it was to Christine Pankhurst, the younger Pankhurst, that this was what she needed to do. And because she went to school in London, she became active with the Pankhursts and really got an education there with a level of ferocity and determination that carried through, where many of the suffragists in the United States felt she was too aggressive. But she felt, if we go state by state by state like this, which was the Susan B. Anthony strategy, it'll take 200 years to do this, and we want this now.
Check out Church of Judas
Sometimes for that.
if you've been burned by Christianity.
They force feed them when they went on hunger strikes. Not only that, they were constantly humiliated. They'd be protesting in front of the White House. They'd take President Woodrow Wilson's speeches about democracy and burn them in trash cans. It was very provocative. And of course, men who, after 5,000 years of patriarchy, thought that wasn't a very ladylike thing to do, would just approach them, spit on them, slap them, and humiliate them.
And Alice Paul actually wrote the text for the Equal Rights Amendment, which has yet to become part of the Constitution. Is it an example of success and failure?
You know, the notion of success is discussed over and over in the book. There were 2 assumptions that we had that were constantly smacked down by thought leaders and by social movement leaders. One, that there's a playbook. If you do these things, you'll be successful. And the converse is true, that actually you have to be willing to fail. Some of these struggles are multi-generational. Often there's violence perpetrated against the protesters. So the idea,
and when things work, they figure out ways to stop them.
A while, and you might have, you know,
it can't be the same playbook.
Sam Walker at the Voting Rights Museum at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. You know, he talked about his work with young people, because the work to be done in an area like racism in the United States can take generations.
And Brian Gruber, you and your co-author of Surmountable, Adam Monier Edwards, also explored the bonus army. Here are these veterans from World War I. They come to Washington to ask for pretty basic things: a bonus to their really low pay while in the war before they die. And eventually you have Douglas MacArthur calling them traitors, George Patton leading the eviction of them from their camp that they set up in Washington, D.C., burning down shacks, gassing them. That seems like a failure at first.
Yeah, and it was only when
more things stay the same.
Roosevelt, a liberal, sent finally these remaining protesters down to the Florida Keys, and there was a massive hurricane, and Ernest Hemingway happened to be, you know, at the bar in Key West when all this happened, and he saw when all these guys were flooded and killed, he saw their dead bodies floating in the water, and he wrote this story in a leftist publication that became a national outrage. And that finally, 2 things happened.
I never heard of it.
Really transformational. One, finally they got their bonus after all those years. Again, struggle. The things you think you're going to do.
That's your military you're supposed to care so much about.
Yet,
cancel the military. It's obsolete. War's obsolete, and all they do is lie. We can't even win a war against Iraq or the Taliban. Come on. I mean, of course, Putin was running both sides on that through Trump, but